Good evening. I'm Javita Hill, and I am the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Commission for Women and the Mayor's Office of Engagement for Women. Thank you for joining us for the sixth installment of our virtual series, Your Voice, Your Power, Your Vote, Making Democracy Work. You'll be able to find registration information on attending future programs in this series in the chat. And if you have questions at any time during this program, you may also put your questions in the chat. We have programs scheduled for Monday, March 28th, when we will commemorate National Day of Empathy with Ardela's House, the Dream Corps, and the Empathy Network. Tuesday, March 29th, we'll be joined by Council Member Maria Canones Sanchez when we have a conversation around mobilizing the Latino vote. And our final Women's History Month program in the series will be on Thursday, March 31st, when our guests will be Latasha Brown, who is the co-founder of the Black Voters Matter Fund, and Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin, whose latest book is Resistance: How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump. The Philadelphia Commission for Women was established by a unanimous ballot referendum in 2015, sponsored by former council member Blondell Reynolds Brown. We are charged with promoting policy recommendations to the mayor, city council, and the city's decision makers on issues of gender equity and social justice. To this extent, our priorities have been wage equity, access to affordable childcare, fair workweek scheduling that provides for predictable scheduling, especially for people working in the retail, fast food, and hospitality industries. This is critical for working mothers who need predictable hours to schedule doctor's appointments, conferences with teachers, and childcare. Our advocacy has also been around raising the minimum wage, access to affordable transitional housing for formerly incarcerated women, access to affordable childcare, access to menstrual hygiene products for school-age people, and addressing our city's maternal mortality disparities. We were instrumental in reforming and strengthening the city's sexual harassment workplace policies, and we advocated for legislation that we called the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. For the first time, domestic workers have workplace protection. They have paid vacation, transportable benefits that they can take from one employer to another. Our series, Your Voice, Your Power, Your Vote, Making Democracy Work, was inspired by the difference that women in general and Black women in particular made in the 2020 elections that delivered the nation's first Black and Asian American woman vice president and turned around historic Senate races in Georgia. We also saw our democracy under siege last year on January 6th, when violence erupted in an attempt to overturn a fair and free election. We know elections have consequences. Just over the past few months, we've seen the erosion of abortion rights and LGBTQ rights in states across the nation. And today we are eyewitnesses to the fragility of democracy when we see what is going on in Ukraine. And with this in mind, and throughout the rest of our year, this year, our programming will be dedicated to encouraging voter participation. Elections really do have consequences. Our commission is comprised of 27 people, of which 1 member is appointed by each of 17 council members. 10 members are appointed by the mayor. Each member serves a term at the pleasure of their appointing authority. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you two young women who I admire, and they are the face of politics of the future. As the title implies, Shattering the Glass Ceiling, Don Miller and Taylor Daukaus represent a crop of young women breaking the mold of winning local campaigns. Just to remind you, Mayor Jim Kenney's winning campaign for mayor in 2015 was run by Jane Slusser, who became his first chief of staff. President Biden's 2020 campaign manager was Jen O'Malley Dillon. She currently serves as Deputy White House Chief of Staff. I thought this was an important topic to include on our calendar, since historically and traditionally, campaign management has been an all-boys club. If you've heard it once, you've heard it twice. Women are great campaign volunteers. They'll knock on hundreds of doors and stuff a zillion envelopes. But when it comes to paid staff, that has always been a male domain. But these women are changing the way campaigns are run, and they're changing who gets paid. Welcome, Don Miller and Taylor Daukaus. You're among a growing number of women campaign strategists leading the charge, and I am proud to have you on our program tonight. So I think I'll start with my first question. Or maybe, instead of me starting with a question, I think maybe the first thing I want to start is if each of you could tell me how you got into campaign management, what was your path? And so we'll start with you, Taylor. How did you become a campaign manager, and now you are Catherine Gilmore Richardson's chief of staff? Tell me your journey. Oh, that's you, Taylor.
Sorry, I think I froze. Everybody went out, so I did not even hear the question.
Yeah. Okay, so let me repeat it then.
Sorry.
What was your journey from campaign management to chief of staff to Catherine Gilmore Richardson?
Absolutely. So I am actually a longtime friend of Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson. I have known her from her previous work when she worked for former Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown. I was Councilman Reynolds Brown's finance director. So I did the money managing to make sure the campaigns ran smoothly at that point for her. So my interactions with Kathy were strictly on like a colleague level. So her and I just became close through that process. So obviously we saw Councilman Reynolds Brown decide that her time had come and she was ready to retire and take on something new. And we all knew that it was Kathy's turn to run, right? She was ready to run. And as soon as I knew that, I was behind her 100% and started just volunteering with her, helping out in the evenings and the weekends. And as we started to get closer to that finish line of victory, I took a leave of absence from my current job, which actually went to the official side, working for former Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. So I was working on her staff in City Hall, and I took a leave of absence to help the Councilwoman close out her campaign and get us across that victory.
What did it actually take to do that, to get to? Because a lot of people, they run several times before they win. Catherine, this was her first time. I knew when I met Catherine maybe 15 years or so, we were all in a class of training women for public office. I was sitting in that class because I was one of those people who I had been volunteering for campaigns since I was 14 years old. And I had been a volunteer communications director for a city council candidate, for crying out loud. But these candidates never saw women as people who should get paid. And so I wanted to take this because I thought maybe campaign management might be something I wanted to do, but I wanted to get paid. So I get that. So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying What was the gist of it? What was it that said, okay, I can do this as a career path?
Oh, there was no single answer that said this is a career path. Every day was met with challenges. There was definitely delays in my personal life. This is not a sustainable environment. Working in campaigns, you have to build a relationship and build a client list. And you have to build those relationships to the point where folks trust you and you have a trusted name to continue to build and actually get more opportunities. And without that, you find yourself in between jobs. I was scheduled to be married in September of 2018 and found myself unemployed in June of 2018. I was working for a finance firm who had decided they were going to close their doors. And I found myself scrambling. What am I going to do next? I had always worked under firms, and I hadn't really been out on my own in the political world. So I didn't know what to do. So what did I do? I picked up the phone and I called the folks that I worked for. And I was like, I'm looking for my next opportunity. Paid work within this environment is very hard. I was like, I'm just looking to, if you can make a connection, if you know any candidates planning to run or who are looking for someone at that time, my specific field of work was finance and field work. So I had done both of those. And at the time, Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, that's when she actually asked me to come to her official side and was like, why don't you see if you enjoyed this work? She's like, you did great in this realm, but look for something that you feel more permanent in. And that feels like you can hold your feet to the ground, because in this environment, it is very unpredictable. And a lot of times, if you want to continue, there's that opportunity of traveling. You may have to move to another state or another city. I heard of opportunities out in Pittsburgh and Harrisburg. But I was young. I have roots in Philly. I'm born and raised here. I was not prepared to pick up and travel anywhere but here. My husband is in local 98. At the time, like I said, I was getting ready to become married. So he couldn't move either. So if this is a world where you want to grow and continue, there is potential that you're going to have to travel and possibly move to another state or another city to get your next opportunity.
What was your path?
Thank you. So my path was, I don't know, my path, I always say I never really set out to be a campaign manager. And I don't think that I ever really set out to even be the councilman's campaign manager. It's one of those things that just happened to me since. Councilman Thomas was always like a mentor to me. I've known him probably for a majority of my life because my mom was one of his mentors when he started teaching. So my mom has been teaching in Philadelphia for over 20 years. So when I came back home after graduating from college, I was, just like most college students, had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I just had a degree in political science and I wanted to do something and be active. And Councilman Thomas at the time, working at the controller's office, he really just told me to go and volunteer on campaigns. And I volunteered on anybody who would take me. I knocked doors in the Northeast. I knocked doors in North Philly. I knocked doors probably in almost every neighborhood in the city, just trying to find a way and just trying to find a way to occupy my time as well as work in the space of politics, which I have been interested in for so long. From doing a lot of that volunteer work, I was able to receive a lot of amazing opportunities. I worked under, incredible women consultants who were leading races at the time. And, I started out as a volunteer, slowly but surely worked my way up to be a kind of paid staffer. I was good. They call it a stipend, so they can make it as low as they need. But, I was making money at that time. So I was just happy for my little check. And then from that experience, I learned how to fundraise, similar to Taylor. I started out and really got down the path of finance, right? And I think that you see that with a lot of campaign managers, because when you're fundraising the money, you got to pay for everything. You kind of get a grasp on how to manage everything because you had to pay for it before, right? So I really got pushed into the world of finance, and I was a finance director for a few state reps, working underneath consultants, and then I got the opportunity to be Larry Krasner's finance director in his race after the primary. So from there, I had built up a lot of experience. So when Councilman Thomas decided that he was going to run again, we had always worked together over that time, and I was helping him to build out the back end of his campaign, putting together his kitchen cabinet, helping him raise money. And when we came to the top of 2018, it was like, well, somebody has to run this thing. And I had been with him for a minute at this time, and it was like, Well, I think I have all the contacts and, I know all the family, so maybe it has to be me. So, fast forward, we're at the beginning of January 2000, what is that, 19? And, I was his campaign manager. A lot of people were not very happy about that because unlike Councilmember Gilmer Richardson, this is Councilman Thomas's third time running for office. And folks were very worried because, in their mind, they thought that this was going to be his last chance. And, no one wanted to put that in the hands of a then 26-year-old to be running this race, especially at her first time. So that's how I got here.
I think that's interesting that that was an issue. I think that's more of an issue, and I think that men can run as many times as they want to, and nobody says anything. But I think the stakes are different for women who, oh, okay, she'll run for anything. She's run so many times. What's up with that? Well, for men, ambition is a plus. Ambition for public office for women, sometimes it's not the same. So if either of you jump in terms of what do those barriers and differences look like? And why do you suppose women don't get the opportunity for campaign management as often as men do?
Killer, do you want to take that one or?
I mean, Javita, I think you kind of hit on it in your opening remarks. Women have been always willing to knock on the most amount of doors, to stuff the most amount of envelopes, to make the most amount of phone calls. We have been the backbone of campaigns. We come out and we organize, we get voters rallied, and we are the ones who get women and men and everyone to the polls. But that's expected to be our role because we've done it for so long, to volunteer in those capacities and continue to do what we've done. But then we've seen more visibility, more opportunities, more women coming to the forefront, taking up those leadership roles, and it's inspiring. And I think every single one of us can think of multiple women's shoulders that we're standing on right now, for the reason why we're where we are. Someone trusted us, someone believed in us, somebody mentored us, and told us that there's more, women need to do more and be more. And in order to do that, we need to get out of behind the closed doors where we're stuffing our envelopes and making our phone calls and be at the forefront of these opportunities.
No, Taylor, I would definitely agree, especially because in the world of campaigns, it's not a clear-cut role, right? Like people kind of get in where they fit in. You have the finance director who's also probably doing social media, who's also doing communications outreach. So you really have to kind of grasp those positions when you can, right? Like even when I was doing finance director, like, I started out as like a deputy finance director, but then worked my way and pulled myself because of the leadership roles that I was taking to be a lead finance director in those roles. And I think, it's even similar to campaigns. Like we don't want to speak up sometimes or feel worried about speaking up sometimes because then we get, questions that male campaign managers don't get, like, what is your experience, right? And then we kind of pull back or get taken away from that, where a male campaign manager, a male staffer may not feel that same way or may not be afraid to, spin those cards or, play or spin those words like they do. So I think that we have a greater litmus test of ourselves, right? We think that we need to be and do so much more. People didn't want me to run the councilman's campaign, but, I had run state and local campaigns even before I had got to his race and had raised over $6 million for candidates, and I had been leading races like that even before I ran Councilman Thomas's race for council. So even having all that, people were still concerned. And I think that even I was concerned to a certain extent, but I think that's like the extra pressure that we put on ourselves to be perfect and to step into those leadership roles.
Absolutely.
How do you take that pressure off? Because I think there are probably young women listening to this, because I think a lot of the people who are attending this, the whole idea of stepping out into leadership, and especially leadership when it comes to elected public office, there's all of that second guessing. So how do you rise above that?
I think for me, I realized that actually nobody knows what they're doing, not even these men who try to act like they know what they're doing. And I realized that I realized that mid-campaign, and I'm like, you guys are making this up on the spot too. Okay, all right. So it's just your way against my way. Let's rock out. So I think that like that's one part of it, right? So because like I think for so long we're taught that there's a specific way of how to do things, and we don't rely on our own our own intelligence and our own experience to know that, you're saying one thing and I think that that's great and all, but, I have another way that could actually work. And here's why, and I'm smart enough and have the skills to be able to fulfill that. So I think that, when we're considering what it means to be, a female campaign manager or running in this space, like it goes back to what I was saying before, we have a greater pressure on ourselves. And sometimes we kind of have to pull back and realize that there is no set way and that everybody else doesn't know what they're doing either for the most part.
The line, we're faking it till we make it, really holds true. And sometimes when we're faking, it just so happens to work. And you're like, all right, so we can try that again. We'll work that into the system.
Right. They call that innovation. That's called innovation.
Innovation and improvising.
That is exactly right. And I think probably, and probably for me, this flying by the seat of one's pants in the political realm, and for me also in television, the work that I've done, it becomes second nature. You can't fail, so how am I going to succeed? Because I don't do failure.
That's right. And I think one of the number of things we learn is that we're always in a crisis. When you're in a campaign, the campaign is the crisis. And there's going to constantly be a new one. And this morning's problems are going to be different than this evening's problems. And what was the largest priority at 8 o'clock this morning is not going to be your priority tomorrow morning. So it's learning how to adjust, improvise, and develop, and just continue to move forward and find, the next step you're going to take to get to where you need to go.
I think probably the word is pivot.
Yes.
Pivot.
And
I think what's happened, especially during this pandemic, we've been pivoting like we've never pivoted before, just trying to, as you say, Dom, innovate.
I've been innovating this whole first term, okay?
Innovating my entire life, girl.
Like especially for folk like me and Taylor, we came in, even though Taylor had started, prior to the pandemic, she was coming into her role like myself as a chief of staff at the top of the pandemic, right? So, we're pivoting left and right. I tell people, I had these grandiose plans coming into council. I was excited. I had binders. I made pullouts and prints and things of that nature. And then come March, everything had completely blown up and we had to completely pivot and change everything in the midst of also learning a new job that we had never done before. And I think that I started reverting back to campaign mode because that was a lot of what the campaign was. It was every single day things were changing. For example, I didn't get my field director, until probably about April. So, I'm adding staff as the campaign's coming along and, we're building out and changing. It becomes so much. So I feel like, coming off the campaign, it really did train me for being a chief of staff in COVID because it was just like, okay, what's today's task? Here we go, building the plane as we fly.
And I am looking at a question in the chat, which I think is absolutely perfect for right now. And this question is for both of you. And the question is, I'd love to know, how do you deal with the stress of running a campaign?
Now that is an excellent question. And there is no one answer that I'm going to give you, because one day dealing with the stress of the campaign may have just been finding 5 minutes to myself to call somebody that I was close to. There was late nights, early mornings, not much breaks in between. I found myself relying on a girlfriend who lives in Maryland, and I'd call her and I'd be like, I just have to make it home. And I was like, I just need to have somebody to talk to, and I can't relay the stress onto my candidate. And no one else is going to understand what I'm talking about. So just let me vent for a few minutes. Let me go on about how crazy my day was. So it's finding those couple minutes of solitude to reprieve, let it all out, and kind of like refresh. And then also finding ways to eat healthy during that process. I know that sounds crazy, but you are on the move and you are doing takeout like 3 meals a day because you're doing a breakfast with somebody, you're grabbing lunch on the go through the drive-through, and dinner's probably pizza again. Let's be honest. And I found myself like needing to like find ways to like eat healthy, which also helps me with my stress because I know when I'm eating lots of like fatty foods, it ain't gonna work. It makes you more drowsy and more sleepy. You're not with it. So my importance was finding a few minutes to reprieve and finding ways to like fit in some healthy eating.
I wish, I wish I had things to add because I did not manage my stress well when I was a campaign manager. I'm not even going to lie. And I think that, because I did not manage my stress well, I think that, now when I'm preparing young ladies who also are running campaigns or who are going to be running campaigns, or young ladies that I speak to about this, I do stress them to have their own type of stress relief or own mental care or mental prep because I did not have that. On a personal note, I feel like I went through, people always laugh, but I went through postpartum depression after that campaign where I feel like I had a baby and it was supposed to be beautiful and I was supposed to be so happy and everybody's supposed to be like, yes. And I was like crying my eyes out because I had no idea like who I was anymore, what I had going on, because my life had been that campaign and I did not do the best job at taking care of myself. Now, I feel like I've worked better now as a chief of staff and I've gotten my routines and, I have my Sundays and, lunches with my mom and, weekly visits with my girlfriends that live out of the city, that I've worked into my routine now. But, I always feel like I was kind of like the poster child for what not to do when you're a campaign manager, because I did not eat well, or I was not eating at all. Or, I was working 7 days a week. And even on my days off, I was still checking in the campaign office like, hey guys, what's going on? Like, what are you guys doing? So I think that, I wish I had better advice, but what I'll say is just to make sure to have a routine and to make sure that you are checking on yourself. Because while you are a female campaign manager, even if you have all the support in the world, you are still trying to prove something, if not to everybody around you, to yourself. And you're going to go so much harder because the lens on you is so much different. And that was, that's how I felt. And it was like, well, I don't really need to sleep. I have this mission and, my deadline date is, April or May, whatever that campaign day was. And I just kind of pushed through till then. And that's not healthy at all. So whatever routine you can find, stick with it, set your boundaries as much as you can with your client. It's going to be very difficult, especially if you're friends with your client, because that changes it. If you guys are straight payroll, it changes the dynamic a little bit. But when they're your friends and the family and stuff like that, it definitely changes the vibe a little bit. But definitely find a routine and stick to it if you're running campaign or really are in any leadership role for that matter.
You just mentioned something briefly, but I caught it, that you're training young women for campaign management. Tell us about that.
So I'm always here for a little plug, especially in this new role. So beginning of this year, I started as a chair of She Can Win. I had always been a part of She Can Win that Jasmine Sessoms founded almost about 11 years ago now at this point. And then Jasmine decided, for whatever reason, because I think she was doing an incredible job, that it was her time to step down. And myself and LaDacia Maxwell, as well as Nyla Ford, are now the chairs of the organization. And what She Can Win does is we train women of color or women across Pennsylvania how to run for office. We've trained over 1,000 ladies how to run for office, and we're rebooting our program again. We took some downtime in the middle of the pandemic. Clearly, everybody was adjusting, but we're going to be starting up training again, and really pivoting not just to train women how to run for office, but also how to train women how to run campaigns and run for office. So our first training is actually coming up in May. So I'll be, sharing information about that soon. But that's the work that I love to do. I feel like, Taylor knows, like, you get like you get the keys, and this is not taught in classes. Like, I have a degree in political science, and everything that I learned about running campaigns, I learned on campaigns. So, I want to, and I feel like, teaching women these skills is also how we usher more ladies into this path, because this is not taught as something that can be, you know, an option for us, or we don't think of it as a valuable option to make money, or you don't think about all the opportunities that you can do and all the skills you can build out and also charge people in order to do that, right? So, you know, I'm always like, get all these skills, take this, learn how to fundraise and just be a newsie on Facebook, like just pocketing all the things that they can get, because that way we can see more women running campaigns, more women entrepreneurs. And then also you can apply a lot of skills that you have on campaigns, like fundraising, like communication skills, like organizing, to so many different fields, whether or not, you know, you're working in corporate America, whether or not you're running a nonprofit. These skills are soft skills that can be taken in so many places. So, you know, I tell anybody who wants to have any type of influence to learn how to run a campaign, because, you know, that's really what you're doing. You're learning how to influence, and you're learning how to effectively push a message across.
That's so very important, especially when we're talking about engaging more women in leadership roles, whether it's running a campaign, whether it's being a candidate. And also it addresses, I think, moving from the political realm of volunteer to career. I think it also addresses the gender wage gap. So if all of the people getting paid in campaigns are men and all of the volunteers are women, it definitely points to that gender wage gap. So what the two of you are doing is amazing work. And I love what you're doing. And so I think probably, I guess what I want to go with is that as you've been doing this and expanding the definition of a campaign manager, and the two of you have a lot to be proud of, because not only have you been campaign managers, but you've run winning campaigns. And running a winning campaign has to look good on the resume. Okay. But in, you know, mapping this new path, what have been the pitfalls and the barriers?
Well, the same barriers still exist. This is still a boys' club. I'm sure Dom can relate. There is still rooms that I walk into. I could walk in next to the councilwoman, and I definitely get looked down upon. And you can tell the dynamic of the conversation could change. The way somebody's interacting with you is different than how you just saw them interact with a male colleague. And it's just, I look young. And I look young because I am still young, right? So I think that aside from being a woman and being a young woman, it's like you already got 2 X's against your name and all you did was walk through the door. You haven't even had an opportunity to say what you're doing here. So I think that, you know, we are still in a boys' club, and it's finding ways to break through that barrier and push yourself into conversations to allow people to have an opportunity to listen to you. I find myself in those challenging situations often. And I am grateful that I actually have the opportunity to try to change that dynamic, and bring young women with me. And this is one of the councilwomen's favorite things, and it's one of my favorite things about our office, is inviting young women to intern in our office, to see those experiences, to have those conversations, to build up strong women who can use their voice when they enter a room and talk and speak and be heard. Because that's one of our largest barriers is, you know, we have X's against our name before we even get there.
How about you, Dom?
I would say ditto to everything Taylor just said. I mean, like, at least when you walking with the council lady, you got that lady. I'm walking with Councilman Thomas and they just cut me out of the conversation. They're like, okay, you're Curlier's assistant. You're the lady assistant. I'm going to cut you out. And I'm like, no, I'm actually the boss. So he's going to have to check back in with me if it makes it to the
That's
schedule.
right.
So, you know, and I definitely think that, you know, Taylor hit it on the head on the professional side about, you know, having to really assert yourself as a leader in those spaces, even when people try to cut you out. And I'll also say, like, you know, some of the pitfalls of this is a lifestyle choice, right? Like, as Taylor mentioned earlier, you know, you make, like, campaigns are not a sustainable life, especially if you're in leadership, especially if you're running large campaigns. You're not having a regular 9 to 5. You have maybe a 8 to 11 if you're lucky. right? And those, and that's mid-campaign. And then, Lord knows what happens after the primary, especially if you work in Philadelphia. So I think that, the lifestyle choice becomes the negative, and that you really have to have a passion for this, right? You have to find, somebody that you really care about their mission, and that makes it a lot easier, because sometimes when you just do it as a check, it does become a lot harder. I was fortunate enough to have a candidate right from the back, like Councilman Thomas, that I really believed in his message, and I was like, okay, I'm willing to do this, right? But when you're working 7 days a week and almost 365 sometimes, it's hard to have relationships. It's hard to go out, or even when you want to do that, you have to ingrain in your mind that that stuff is okay, because you're so used to working to that level. And I think that that's a barrier that we don't really talk about a lot, but I feel it every single day. So in addition to the problems that we face, inside the office while we're, actually in work, trying to get people to really see us as leaders, there's also a backlash of that in our life, and what we're also trading off, and the time and the commitment that we have put into these roles.
So I'm going to go to the chat for a minute, because they're not really, there are a couple of them, they're not really questions, but I think they're comments that we can share with everybody. So there's one of the comments that says, it's the level of respect women are to each other. It's sad to see how there's few women in elected office. It's harder when there isn't a true support system. So address the support system and how important that is.
I think how you doing, Council Rep Parker? How you doing? Thank you for tuning in. But no, I think that you make a great point, because when you think of your support system, it usually goes for those closest to you. And if your support system doesn't know anything about campaigns, and it's like the blind leading the blind, it doesn't make you feel, excited or really ready for that race, right? So I think that not having a support system that also is not as knowledgeable about this space as well, I think that becomes a struggle. And then sometimes women then have to surround themselves with a lot of men, and that does change the dynamic of the campaign. I think that you have a different, it's way different running campaigns for women than it is for men. And I even think that there's a different vibe when women are running campaigns versus when men are, because, even Councilman Thomas says is that women have a way different attention to detail than men do, that I think that is extremely important as a campaign manager. So I always appreciate, when women who want to run for office lean on their close friends and bring them into that race, because, you need that air, you need a support system, and you need somebody who really knows you, instead of, somebody who might try to come in and, make you be a cookie cutter candidate, or, try to get you to see things their way because this is the old model. Like, sometimes having that support system that comes from where you come from, that's going along with you in this journey, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm always, if you are somebody running for office and you're, you have a person or a friend you want to bring along with you, send them to the training, because, I love for women to have that support, because it makes a world of difference. And then, even the most incredible women, that I've seen, that I admire, that I work with so much, that are the most incredible speakers. They've, introduced incredible legislation. Even they are afraid to take this journey. And I'm like, do you even understand how incredible you are? And that just speaks to the type of climate that we've created for women to step into these roles. And sometimes you want to have your girl in the back that's like, no, sis, you have this. This is you. Don't ignore them. Remember back in the day when we used to, so, you want to have that type of connection. So I definitely think that support system matters. And I think that, bringing those people along with you, even though some people think it may be a bad thing, I think can be very helpful.
I think so too. I think also part of the question might also have been, how well do women elected support each other? So say, for instance, if we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, do we know that women elected officials have some sort of secret club of support for one another, or a support system that they have by virtue of being a woman?
I think all women elected officials support one another. I know that specifically for my council person, she always tries to uplift her not only her fellow colleagues in council that are women, but also our local state representatives by working with them and uplifting the work that they're doing. So we definitely try to uplift their work and do partnership and work together. So absolutely. And I just wanted to add to Rep. Parker's previous comment that that's exactly right, is we need more women to bring the women with them. And we don't see that enough. We really don't. Women get, they're not saying everywhere, but there are certain areas where women get to positions of leadership and they don't look to mentor and bring more women with them. They're just happy they made it to where they are. And I think about the campaigns that I ran and that I've worked on, they were all men until I started working for former Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. All men, all of them. And it just so happens that that specific council person decided to bring Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson along with her. And now Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson is mentoring me, and I'm mentoring young women under me. So you can see the chain of command. So we need all women in positions of power to do exactly that method and to follow it.
Absolutely. Each one teach one.
That's right.
And I see that in the two of you, and it makes me feel so very, very proud to see what is going on in my city and in my city council. It's a beautiful thing to see. It's beautiful to see the two of you. And then I'm going to go. State Representative Parker has put something else in the chat that I'm going to go ahead and read. She says, where is it? Okay, it's about the dollars. For example, women, especially of color, donated to Kamala, but on the local level, the money is very low. It's why many of us depend on the men to raise the dollars. Women are raising the money, and it's not because they don't have the ability of purse, they just don't. Have either of you seen that dynamic in terms of campaign contributions? I think that's what she's talking about, campaign contributions. And I say that, and she's a candidate, and I guess she knows what she's talking about, because I've never run for office, but I've raised a hell of a lot of money for candidates. So I haven't seen the stingy side, because I'm stingy.
Well, I would 100%.
But from your experience, tell me.
You know, I think when you're a fundraising consultant and you go to usual donors and you see them, you know, you're raising with a candidate with a similar profile, and they'll literally give one candidate $750 and give another candidate $500, and it's only because she's a woman. Like that's a very, I've seen it happen many times. Or even like, you know, I remember I had a campaign manager who I was working with on a distant race, and it was the first time he had ever ran a race for a Black woman at that, and he was just so flabbergasted by how hard it was for him to raise money for this woman. And I'm just like, this is not anything foreign. Like, I told you this is going to be difficult. This is not as easy as raising money for a man. And it's even not even just the fact of getting somebody on the phone. It's literally the amounts that they will consider giving you will be drastically different than what they'll give their male counterparts, unless you maybe are in leadership. But even then, you still have to fight to just get, you know, what, you know, members, like I hate to say regular members, but what other members are just getting. I think that that's ridiculous. And, you know, sometimes women are some of the most active members in the chambers, where they're introducing and the most legislation that do pertain or that do, you know, support these donors, and they still have to fight so hard in order to get those dollars or even to be seen as a good investment. Because that's really what it is. It's you investing in a candidate, and they have to truly believe that, you know, that their ROI is going to mean something, or that you actually can win this race or can, you know, move whatever across. So I definitely think that that's very blatant, and I've seen that.
Okay, then how do we change that dynamic? What do we have to put in place? Because I think what we're talking about also is women wanting to impact a candidate. And so you can impact a race in several ways, by volunteering, by giving money. How is it that, what is the dynamic that would shift how women support candidates, and especially how women support women candidates.
I think this is a conversation that we've been having, and we've been trying to encourage women to donate more, and to encourage women to talk to other women about donating more. That is how you win a campaign. It's the ugly truth. If you don't have the dollars, you don't win. If you don't have the dollars, you can't print, you can't pay folks to work on your campaign. You can't have people out on election day wearing a t-shirt that has your name on it, handing out papers at the polls. You just can't do it. So when you look exactly right at folks donating to Kamala Harris, you're like, that's great. You supported a woman who's at the federal level, all the way at the top, who's never going to impact your daily life. It's amazing that she's our vice president, but someone who's going to impact your everyday life, you won't support them because you believe in their message. So how do we get women to believe in the power of local politics and donating to those candidates is the question. I don't think we can put that directly on just the candidate. I think we need more groups to come together. You know, for example, like the councilwoman always will heavily rely on her sorority to lift her up. So we need more organizations like sororities to continue to lift women up, and support women.
How about the idea of women forming PACs?
And there is PACs that exist. There's examples, you know, there's like Emily's List. But a lot of those dynamics have even changed. It can be considered. You need to raise now an X amount of dollars to even be considered to get money from that PAC. And it's like you originally formed to help women on the ground, building a campaign up from the ground, and then put up barriers to prevent them from getting those dollars, right? So we need women to really form local politic PACs that they're going to support local candidates in their communities.
And Jovita, I'm actually happy you brought that up because, you know, even though She Can Win is now forming over to nonprofit, which is why I'm able to be the chair, you know, for at least for the last 4 years, we were operating as a PAC. And I think that was probably one of the most incredible things was to be able to donate and support, you know, women running for office. And, you know, I think that, you know, we supported some incredible candidates. The council lady, you know, was definitely on that list. And I think that it's amazing. And you know, somebody even put it in the, I think Taylor said, and somebody put it in the chat, but, you know, a lot of ours were not based on how much money you already have. It was the understanding that you do need a certain amount of seed funding in order to get larger dollars because people want to see what you have raised. So a lot of times, you know, we would donate to candidates early on in their races and donate to them at larger amounts than they probably were getting before. So, you know, I agree. I always, you know, I can't do it right now legally, but if somebody else wants to start another PAC, I'm always here for it. You know, maybe I'll donate, call Tommy at the right time. But I agree. I think that we also need to be supporting that because that's how we also make sure that issues that affect women solely are being answered, right? Because a lot of what She Can Win's mission and why we supported candidates was about their platform for supporting women and supporting women of color, you know, what their plans were to help support our community.
I have to read this because it's making me laugh. Not only did Representative Parker thank She Can Win for being one of her donors, but she also said, don't get me started. If you can afford red bottoms, Chanel bags, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Tiffany, or David Yurman, I don't even know who some of these people are. Okay, so wait a minute. So she's not talking about me. You can donate $1,000 to $2,500 to campaigns. And what I'm saying is preach, Representative Parker, preach. Okay, and then there's another comment from Kelsey Ginnup. Is there a way to make campaign management sustainable? I wonder if that's why there aren't a lot of women in paid positions in politics.
I think that there are ways. I think that, you know, there are ladies at the federal level who will probably crack this a little bit better than at the local level. I think that, you know, at the local level, especially in Philadelphia, we have a cycle that basically ends in the summertime, to where your race really only matters to folks between January in March, right? So that's really what becomes fickle in this space in Philadelphia. So I think that, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, thinking about training women. You know, it's about, and especially if you want this to be, you know, your role and you want to be a campaign manager, it's about, you know, making sure you have the right amount of clients, right? And I think that becomes very difficult for consultants, because sometimes we've seen consultants who have done an incredible job. They get a bunch of clients and then they end up cracking under the pressure because they cannot, you know, sprinkle their magic in a million places. And then some people suffer in that sense. So I think it's about, you know, really finding that sweet spot of clients, but then also finding that sweet spot of clients that are running at different cycles. So that way, as one is ending, you know, you can pick up another one because they have a race. You know, I think that's why, you know, maybe if you could work with state reps, that could be a consistent thing. They run every 2 years, maybe have one council member and then maybe add another level. And then those cycles could be a way to sustain. Now, I've never tried this before, but, you know, thinking about that, it will be just about putting together and being able to really map that out. And that takes a lot of, you know, targeting, as well as understanding the climate, as well as hoping you have a couple of incumbents who can raise some good money. So,
but that also reminds me of something else about this glass ceiling, and the two of you know this better than I do. I do not know, and if you do, please tell me. One of the important pieces of running a campaign is polling. I do not know of a single polling operation that's run by a woman. Do either of you?
I don't.
I'm not familiar either. I've never worked with one. I don't think that now, not to say that there aren't any in Philly, but I don't think I've ever worked with any female pollers.
I have actually never worked with one in Philly. A lot of my campaigns, they would go to companies based out of DC for their polling. So I don't know if any women run ones.
Yeah, I think that's another aspect of the campaign political ecosystem where there's still a glass ceiling, where if you wanted to hire a woman-owned polling operation, I think you'd be hard pressed to find one. I don't know that to be sure, but I suspect that's true. Okay, so we're close to time at this point for both of you, and you could start, Taylor. Just some of the closing comments that you would want for our audience to know about your work, your passion, and whatever it is you want to say.
Absolutely. So I really chose this work because I just wanted to find a way to help people. I started knocking on doors when I was about 2 feet tall. My dad was an organizer through his union. He was the sheet metal worker local 19 union. And he would take me out knocking doors, putting things in doors, and I had no idea what I was doing, right? Election day, I found myself standing outside of polling locations with him. And as I got older, I understood what he was doing and understood the power behind it. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to help people. I want to make it. I want to make a difference. So I continued just to find my way and how I was going to do that. In my brain, that was going to be through law school. That obviously didn't happen. I found myself on campaigns, and it really, you find a passion for it. You find a passion for helping clients who you believe are going to bring about the change you want to see in your city. So find those clients, have clients that you're proud to work for, because if you don't believe in their message, it's going to make this work 10 times more difficult and not even slightly enjoyable. Find ways to manage your time, find ways to be organized, make good connections. Everyone you meet is a connection and they know a connection. So always collect business cards, always have a business card, whether even if it's just that, you know, you work for yourself right now, always walk into a room with a business card. Just be aware of all the people around you and make sure you continue to build those connections. And also find the ability to be a manager. You're not just managing yourself, you have to manage a client. So when you manage up like that, it's very challenging. Managing a client, especially someone who's running a campaign, they're insane. So you just got to find ways to hold them to the ground, to hold yourself to the ground. Find ways to build yourself up in that crisis moment. Become a multitasker. They say we can't multitask. Yes, we can. And Always find ways to manage your personal and your professional time, always. Kick it over to you, Dom.
Oh goodness, now I have to follow up. I'm trying to think like, what can I say? Motivational, inspirational. But no, I first of all ditto to everything Taylor said. And I think that, what I'll close out with saying is, for all the ladies that are watching this, to just do it. I think that if you're questioning this and if you're watching this, you probably have some idea or have some inkling to want to be a part of this. And I say just do it. Don't try to be a perfectionist. And please do not be afraid or hesitate to reach out to those around you. I think that we always think that we have to start a lot of this alone. And even though there's not many of us, there are women who have done this that want to talk to you and probably just don't have the time to make that first connection, but would be 100% ready to share and be there for you, if you were to make that outreach. So I definitely say to do it, to not feel that you need to be a perfectionist, and to also not to be afraid of taking up spaces that don't that were not designed for folks that look like us. I'm in school right now. One thing they talk about is that everybody brings something to a team, and the reason why you are there is because you are bringing something that no one else has. So, as a woman, as a leader, as a Philadelphia lady, as a Philly John, you have to lean into that otherness, because we bring something to the table that is like nothing that others have seen before. And I think that with this political climate that we see right now, where we're constantly on the news saying this is the first time in history or the first time in decades, we need that type of innovative leadership, and we need new leaders to come to the table, because it is not the same battles or the same issues that we were dealing with a decade ago or even a year ago. So I say do it. I say lean in, and I say reach out and email anybody who you get in contact with. And if they ignore you, oh well, but find another lady, because there is one that will definitely talk to you for sure. And if not, email me, because I'm here.
This is a very interesting question that's in the chat. This is from Kathy Garrett Davis. Philadelphia hasn't had a female mayor. Do you see momentum building for that to change in this decade? If fundraising is the issue, do we need to start now with identifying a candidate and building a war chest?
I think the climate is now set for us to have, more women leadership across the board in the city. I think that the climate is set, and I think that, there are, some amazing women who names have been floated around, and do we need to start raising money? We should have been starting to raise money almost 2 years ago, because this lady is going to be battling, so much more than her male counterparts, and are probably going to be coming to the table with a lot less resources, no matter who she is. So, while I may not know who that lady candidate is going to be or who that next woman candidate is going to be, but I do think that it is time. And like I said before, we need a new set of leaders and to address a lot of the issues that we're going through right now. And I think I said this on the last panel that I did, but I always thought it was so interesting that countries that had women at heads of office at the beginning of COVID lost less life, right? Like that is a fact. And I think that goes back to the type of leadership that women bring to the table. So I think it is time. I think that there are some ladies' names that's out there floating. And I think that if you want to support or want to see women in office, you should have been donating to them ladies a year ago, but it's not too late. Find them and start donating right now, because they need it.
I want to thank you so very much for what has been a fabulous conversation this evening about your careers, your work around campaign management. And I also want to make sure people know that the two of you are probably the youngest campaign managers running campaigns for the youngest city council members. And so I think that says a lot about the future of Philadelphia politics. And I really appreciate that the two of you have joined us this evening, because it feels great. It feels like we're on the verge of something new, and the two of you are going to take us to that future. Thank you so very much. Have a good night, everybody. And thank you for joining us for this, our 6th installment of Your Voice, Your Power, Your Vote, Making Democracy Work. Join us next week. We've got more for you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jovita.